Okay, so look, let's start. What today's session looks at is the notion of collaborative engagement tools, and in the context of Charles Sturt, there is only really two, I would argue, currently that are supported with an enterprise license and accessible easily to both staff and students. So in the learning and teaching context, the two that we're going to talk about today are probably the main the main tools available. And as you can see there from the second kind of area that I have to talk about is I will speak briefly about Miro because I almost always get asked why don't you incorporate Miro into these sessions? And the answer is very simple. It's because it's quite difficult for students um, to all be using it. And by definition, when we're talking about collaborative engagement tools, and I am presenting from a Padlet board today, which I'm happy to give you the link for. We'll drop that into the chat. I can switch it to presentation mode, changing it from a collaboration tool into a presentation tool, which gives us the ability to do things like peer-to-peer engagement, to work on group productivity, or also allows for individuals to engage with it themselves. They can be used synchronously, as long as everyone's looking at it at the same time, obviously, or they can be let free for students to engage with them at their discretion. So most commonly, I would argue they're used asynchronously, but that's not to say that they can't be used at the same time because they update live. As you add content or add contributions to them, it is live. So there isn't a space in between time-wise where you have to wait to see those results. It is a synchronous environment if you're engaging with it together at the same time. A lot of the time, tools like Padlet and also the whiteboarding tool that we're going to look at in Zoom get floated as good environments for brainstorming, for mud mapping, for mind mapping, etc. Some work better than others. So a Canvas tool like the Zoom whiteboard tool that we will have a look at is probably a lot easier in a traditional sense of drawing a mind map with boxes and directional arrows and what have you. But if you put your mind to it, you can actually do those type of activities in both tools. And really, what I find unique about Padlet in a lot of ways is it has such potential for you to reframe the way that you traditionally approach different types of learning and teaching activity. And part of that's to do with the different modalities that are built into it, not just at the post level, but the way the boards can be utilized. And we'll get more into that as we start to work through the tool. So, as I mentioned before, the reason I don't get into Miro is that you can't collaborate in Miro unless you have an account, which essentially is saying they talk a lot about teams in Miro. You have to be part of a particular team or unit in the system before you can participate on a Miro canvas. And that's fine if everyone's signed up. But in a lot of synchronous activity with students, if you want that to happen effectively, you're going to have to devote time to making sure that all of the students are signed up and are part of the team and are logged in and authenticated against their Charles Sturt credentials before they can just hit the plus and collaborate. So it's not that it's impossible for students to use Miro and get access to Miro. They can sign up with a single sign-on with their Charles Sturt credentials the same as staff can. But they're not collaborating easily with one click, for example, or having it embedded within your subject sites unless that preliminary work of getting everyone signed up and signed in and knowing they have to be authenticated before they can participate, which makes it a little bit of a hassle. So
I had that issue also with Zoom when I used to pre-allocate groups because I would use tutorial time online as an opportunity for some group work for assignment collaboration. And I needed students to sign up with their credentials from the university, and many didn't. They signed in from their own accounts, and so therefore the pre-assigned groups did not work, unfortunately, and I found myself having to do it manually in the class, which of course chewed up time when there was a number of students online. But I had that issue with the Zoom as well, but that was the collaboration in groups with pre-assigned as opposed to the whiteboard you're going to refer to later.
Yeah, and the same thing applies to the plugins in Zoom, a lot of the plugins. So Mentimeter, for example, has a Zoom plugin, and the idea being that you launch the Menti activities from your Menti account live in a Zoom room, and the interface is such that it makes them kind of vote within a shared kind of voting portal inside the Zoom room. The problem is that it only works if everyone's signed up and signed in for that, what's meant to be an easy process, which when you weigh that up against, here's the link for you to vote, click on it, vote. And here's the results for you to look at. So that's the problem. I understand the intention behind integrations, obviously, and wanting to make things streamlined and the interface look sort of smoother in some ways, less clunky and less but the problem is when you require authentication and account holding and what have you for everyone for it to be effective, a lot of the time it's going to result either because of the staff having not set things up the right way in the first instance, or the students just not having accounts, etc. You spend a lot of time troubleshooting, which is exactly what you're talking about. So let's move on. I have left a link there if you are interested in signing up for Miro or want your students to sign up for Miro. It is easy to do, but they're going to have to do it and sign in every time to collaborate in that environment. Okay. So Padlet itself, a little bit of background about Padlet. When it first started, it was referred to by the vendor as a multimodal bulletin board. And bulletin board is a real sort of throwback term, almost, from the 80s in a sense, where you were talking about the precursors to discussion boards. So just a live environment where people could all be in there at the same time making contributions. And Padlet really is the contemporary iteration of that bulletin board concept, where people are able to join and contribute and read other people's contributions. It is a wonderful environment for providing different types of interactivity. We'll look at some of those this morning. A way of engaging the audience in a way that maybe you haven't done with your traditional content provisioning. It allows you to approach content creation in a variety of different ways. As you can see at the moment, it can be turned towards being used as a presentation tool. So if you want a space that can be used for both that brainstorming, planning, creativity, sort of collaboration space, and then pivot to a presentation tool, it does it in a really seamless manner. And in the context of using the Padlet tool, it's over here on the right, you'll see that there is a play icon on every Padlet board, and that will allow the host to turn it into a slideshow where it will work through each of the posts as slides, a la, sort of PowerPoint-esque, like we're looking at here. So it really is a very versatile tool, and I would argue for a jack of all trades looking to try and accomplish all those things in the same space, as well as ease of access, Padlet does it just about better than any other platform I can think of. It allows you to provision your learning artifacts and content, as well as communication in a variety of different formats. We're going to go through some of those. And also different types of media creation. So yes, you'll be able to find better, more powerful, more comprehensive tools for doing things like making a video, or making a screencast, or making an audio grab, or a sound bite, or making a text post, or making an image post. There are lots and lots of tools that can do all those different things in discrete and quite powerful ways. But Padlet does just about all of them all in the one type of environment in a really easy and accessible way for both the staff member and for students. Its versatility is what sets it apart for content creation. By default, when you provision a Padlet board, the people adding to the board are anonymous, which means you have a safe environment for students to participate in and engage with. And if you want to actually for them to be able to identify one another, which happens from time to time depending on the activity, you're going to need to tell them to label their posts with their own names, for example, initials, whatever the case may be, because it's not going to pick up them as authors unless they have signed up for a Padlet account. So when I use a Padlet account and make posts, it identifies me as the author above. But for students, they're anonymous when they contribute. So I think the best thing that we can do at the moment is look at some examples of Padlet being used before we start going through the interface and how the tool set works. So let's have a look at what we've got here. First one I'm going to draw your attention to is Padlet being used as a means of initial introductions in a subject site. And this is very, very common. What we have here is a content page in Brightspace that has a Padlet board which has been created in Padlet and then embedded by the academic. You can see the author or the owner of the board up the top here, and it's been embedded within a content area. When students go to view these pages, let's switch to being a student for a moment. And that was in the welcome area. Let's just open up our tabs, introductions. So we have text being provided above the board by the academic on how to use it. It even provides a little context on what it is. And it says this one, it looks like a map, and that you just need to click on the plus that's down the bottom here for you to contribute. And so the students identify where on the map they are. If they go to hit the plus, they can either search, and it'll use Google Maps, for example, satellite tracking to find the spot. It can be quite specific. You might need to think about this, whether you want students providing an address or if you want it just to be a town marker. If I was talking about, right, I'm in Bathurst, and then I can do Bathurst, New South Wales, for example. So the pin that we were looking at a minute ago that we can see here, for example, is going to be on Bathurst, but then I can also add other stuff about myself. So I could put text in here, and the academic said, introduce yourself and share something about where you live, etc. So there's plenty of scaffolding and instruction about how to use the board. You allocate your pin, you add your text. There are other types of content that you can add to your posts above, and we'll go through those when we start building in the board. But the purpose of this one is for students to pick where they live and introduce themselves, and you get quite an engaging, embedded, interactive activity that is very, very quick and easy to make inside the subject site. If the window that they're looking at it in is too small and the board needs more screen space, you can always expand your Padlet boards by clicking on Open in a new window, and then we get full screen. And you can see we have a listing along the side of where all the pins are as well. So we have a different way of engaging with the Padlet board at a click, if that's what we're looking for. So that is the map format of Padlet board. Let's have a look at some others. Here we have student introductions where they've asked them just to put text. Same premise, they've created a board, they've provided some context, scaffolding around the activity. So in this case, what they want them talking about. And then they add their own introductions. That one doesn't actually say click the plus to share, I don't think. No, but it's intuitive enough, arguably, that they're clicking on the plus and then adding their own contributions. So, pardon me, the Padlet board in this case, instead of using a map, they've just used text, and this is probably the most common way that Padlet boards start to be used within subject sites. Let's have a look at some others. In this instance, we have a midwifery subject where they have provided information for students to help scaffold assessment. And in this case, sometimes they've embedded PowerPoint slides or PDFs as part of their posts, extra material for students to look at. And you'll see that it is organised across the page. So this tells me that the format for this Padlet board is a little bit different. It's not going down the page as well, it's going across the page. And this could be because they've chosen to use a particular Padlet board format called a timeline, but I don't see any times, or it could also be what's called a shelf format. We'll have a look at some of those. But they've used it to provision resources. In some cases, they're web pages that they're directing people to, like a Zoom link. Sometimes they're uploading PDFs. Other times they're directing them to external websites, like there's a health.gov website here, more PDFs. So they're providing resources to students in different formats. In this case, they've embedded a video as a part of it. And again, here's another one. So what you're seeing is that the board is being used to provide content in different formats to students in a visual way. It's interesting that that they're saying scroll down the Padlet as well, because there is no down. It's all across. So that's interesting. Okay, let's keep going. There are other types of information that's being provided in that subject site. So they provided some assessment information. And they also used in this subject, they used Padlet to host a mock conference for students to add their own contributions. So the students would record themselves and they would add their recording as presenters in the mock conference. They would add it to a section of the Padlet board for their group or for their section of the conference that they're presenting on, and then it was used to host those resources during a live event. So themselves and an audience turned up in Zoom, where they then shared the Padlet site, and the presenters then talked through their presentations. So it was used for kind of hosting the content, for presenting the content asynchronously, and then used as to augment the actual live conference itself. So they turned the Padlet board into the conference site itself, which was incredibly engaging. And I think the reason that I can't share it with you this morning is that the site has been hidden because they want to use it again for the current cohort of students, and they're making some adjustments to it. So if I do find that link today, I'll send it to you all. So we've got Padlet boards being used to provide content in a whole variety of different ways. Let's have a look at another format. This is called the timeline format that I mentioned before, and you can see that there are a series, I'm not sure if these are a bit dark for you, but there are a series of posts that go across the page that you would scroll through. And in this format, you can then specify labels for those different time periods. So if the intention of the activity is to show a continuum of some sort, moving from one state through to another, you can then arrange your posts along the timeline, and you can have them both above and underneath the timeline. You can customize the labeling that's used in there as well. But it's just a different way of organizing the posts, the contributions along the board itself. So let me stop there and see, what do we think so far? Can we see some potential? Sue, what do you think?
Yeah, I've used the welcome, and I've also used a Padlet board when I was trying to get students to know it's okay to use AI, and I was getting them to develop a persona, and I got them to answer some questions, put those questions in Copilot, and develop an avatar and put that on the site. I feel that some of the stuff you've put here together has opened up a whole range of new opportunities and doors I would not have thought of. So some of this stuff is so good. I can't wait to go back and use it.
Yeah, look, I think the the sky's the limit with Padlet in a lot of ways. You just need to spend some time,
Yeah,
you know, playing around with the formats and the tools to get some ideas around how you want to approach different activities. But
yeah. I didn't.
there's not a lot
Yeah,
it can't do. Hmm.
yeah. I did. I thought the assignment preparation was actually really good, and if you did that in a bit of a timeline, it gives students a bit of a structure of how to actually approach their different assignments. Like that was actually, I thought that's one of the things I'll be doing. Put it that way, definitely moving forward and seeing how students engage with that particular idea on helping them to prepare. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Assad, I'm not sure if you're with us. Have you been using Padlet before?
I use like for one subject, but not that level, not intensively. Uh, but currently, actually, I'm not using, but I want to use again Padlet because to get involved student interaction in a
Excellent.
different way, not a traditional way. Yeah.
All right, well, let's have a look through the tool set and it might give you both some other ideas around the possibilities because sometimes you don't see any of those until you see behind the scenes, so to speak. So look, the use of Padlet, as you're probably aware, starts by going to, you need to actually sign up for a Padlet account. You probably both have Padlet accounts, but this is for people watching the recording. You'll need to send an email to padlet@csu.edu.au.
Actually, can I interrupt there? They haven't
Sure.
been actually looking at the email and they've asked for people to submit a show.
Submit Sherwell requests.
Yeah, it came through on Tuesday, that idea, because people haven't been getting their Padlet accounts. And it's all because they've been doing other things. They haven't actually focused on the email and no one's been managing that inbox. So they've said if you can put a Sherwell in, it'll probably get attended to quicker.
Okay, I will follow that up with DIT after this as well to
Yeah,
find out if our documentation that we have around this needs to change because
yeah,
our official instruction at the moment is you email that address, it goes to the
yeah,
LTU unit in DIT, and they have someone triaging and creating those accounts. Well, it's meant to be in under 48 hours, but anyway,
yeah.
if that's
It has,
problematic at the moment, we need to know.
yeah, it might just be a short term fix, what I just said, but that's
Okay.
what Matt said.
All right, so when we do have a Padlet account, you're going to be directed to go to the Padlet homepage, which is at charlestonuni1.padlet.org. And what we have on this page is what's called a backpack license. Now, I don't want to confuse you with terminology, but what that means is we can have as many of these as we like for staff. You can create as many Padlet walls as you like. The password for it will never change. So it is not connected to your Charles Sturt Uni credentials. This is a set password, and currently there is no process in place for making you change that periodically. Right? So write it down somewhere, keep a note of it, whatever the case may be. But the password will remain the same. When we come into this environment, we have the opportunity to either look at Padlets that you've made previously, and I have way too many, as you may be seeing in here. And you can search for those if you can't remember the names or the subject codes. So make sure when you're making Padlet walls that the label is specific enough that you will be able to search for it. Or, which is what we're going to do now, you can make a new Padlet. You do have the opportunity to organize some folders if you want to organize your Padlets within different collections. So if you're dealing with multiple subjects, for example, maybe you want to have a folder for each of the subjects and having your Padlet boards in there. It does have a level of organization available to you. And if you have Padlet boards, either your own or others, that you have favorited, they will also be collected in this favorites folder. So if you're looking for a quick way of accessing particular Padlet walls that you're always using, you can favorite them and then be able to find them in the favorites folder. All right, let's get into making a Padlet board. I'm going to click on this Make a Padlet. And this first screen, the vendor is quite prolific in terms of updates. Sometimes that's a great thing. Other times it can be a little overwhelming with what they do. And the first screen now, when you go into Padlet, The area that I would argue most people are interested in first and foremost is creating a new blank board. But underneath, they do have a lot of templates that you can have a look at and modify if you want to use them yourselves. They may be worth looking at if you're interested in how other people approach things like brainstorming, or they have an AI art tool built into Padlet now, for example. Maybe you're interested in using that. But by and large, the area we're going to be looking at is creating a new blank board. I'm not going to talk about sandboxes today. They are a bit more complex in terms of what they're used for, but it basically is allows you to create an interactive environment for people to participate in without necessarily changing any of the structure that you've set in place. So you create a level of interactivity inside a Padlet area, but it is not for people to traditionally just add posts and contributions to. It's more of a controlled environment. Let's get into making a blank board. So this is now live, and what we have up here is an address that's already where this Padlet board is living. I'll drop that into the chat. But effectively, it's already available for us to be using, for people to participate in. It's chosen a background for me, and it has selected the most common format for Padlet, which is a wall, which means that when the participants click on the plus sign and add posts, and you're more than welcome to do that if you want to just muck around with it, they will start on the left. They will populate across the page, and then once they've filled the space, they will start going down the screen and filling up that way. That's how the default wall format works. Clicking on the plus adds a post for us, so I can put sample post. I might even put my initials in here just to show you. We can add text. We can do things like changing the color of the post. At the bottom, you'll see there's some colors. So if it was a sticky note activity and you were telling people to choose a color for their posts, you tell them down the bottom to adjust the color. And then they are also able to add different types of content to their post. Not just text, but they can do all sorts of things. The most common ones are you can upload a file to share with others. You can put in a hyperlink, like sending them to somewhere like YouTube or another website. You could use your webcam if you wanted to take a picture, or you could search for an image to drop in using an image search. Those are only 4 of the options for different types of multimodal content in Padlet. But if you click on the plus sign to the right, we now have a better look at all of the different types of content that people can add to their Padlet posts. They could link to another Padlet board. There's the file upload, the link upload. Then we have an audio recorder, which will give us a record button that allows people to make grabs of audio. So let's choose that one. It's now connected to my microphone. You can see that this is going up and down. And in fact, sorry, I've zoomed in a little so it's made it. You can change your microphone underneath if you need. If I wanted to choose my, whatever the microphone is that I'm using at the moment, that'll do. Hit the record button, and now it's capturing my audio on the spot, and that's going to add to my post when I finish. Let's say that I'm done. We go pause. I can either delete it or I can play it back and save. And I'll just, okay, I can hear my voice there. Now I'm going to hit save. And I'm going to publish my post. It's added it to the wall, and now everyone coming in here can listen to my audio post. Very, very simple. No software needing to be installed, on the spot, adding audio. I can also go in later and change that if I need to. Other types of posts we can do. If we go back into our plus area, if I was going to use the video recorder, we now have the webcam. It can't use my webcam that I'm using in Teams at the moment. So let's switch it to maybe my laptop webcam if I can. I'll turn it off in Teams so that I can do this for you. Hang on one second. Turn that off. And Hey, there we go. All right, so there is me. Yep, definitely there. And then it's capturing me talking here. You'll see the recordings can be up to 30 minutes in length. So if you're looking for a quick way of doing video capture, up to 30 minutes, and it will already appear in the same place you want it published, this is not a bad option. So we can hit plus at that point and then next. There's the video. I can edit it. You'll see there's a trim function available as well, so I can crop it if I need to. Hit save, publish the post, and it's now processing that video before it adds it to the wall. And there's my video added. What else can we do? We have a screen recorder option, which will do screencasting. So if I wanted to record a process or something on my laptop or computer screen or tablet screen, if you're using a tablet device, you can do screencasting with Padlet and it will add it to the board. There is a drawing tool. There is a poll or a quizzing tool that you can add. You can link to Google Drive if you're keen to use that. It also has an AI image generation tool built into the Padlet board as well. So if I click on AI image, it now has a built-in tool that will allow me to put in what I would like Padlet to create. So if I said, a donkey at a computer eating a banana, and then it will create the image or a series of images for me to choose from, which I'll then be able to choose in just a moment. Okay, there we go. Donkey, computer, bananas, and done. Again, you can add a caption if you need to. You can add your text. You can do all those things. But that is the AI drawing tool that's built into Padlet boards, which may have some potential for activities if you're interested in that space. So yeah, you can see that there are many, many different types of content that you can add to this. It's not simply just a matter of giving people a hyperlink or giving them a file attachment. There is a whole other world of interactivity that you can build into Padlet boards for you to think about. You just need to think about how you're going to set it up, the level of instruction or language you need in place for the students to use this the way that it's intended to be used. Otherwise, it's kind of just a free-for-all, really. But in terms of the content types that can be added, you'll see in here that there's a whole variety for you to think about and plan and plot that you might want to put into either one board or multiple boards. I'm not going to go into them anymore today because obviously, we'll hit time. But those are for you to play around with, really. It is very powerful and really accessible for people on either mobile devices or personal computers, etc., to be able to contribute and play in this environment. Let's talk a little bit about the format. So the type of board that you're using. We've been using a wall. If you switch to the column format, you're going to find that you get vertical columns and the ability to organize those into sections. So if you want more than one column, you can add another section and add another section and then start organizing where the different types of content that you want added to the board or that you want students adding to the board can organize those things. So that's a vertical format. There is a rows format down here which does the same thing but horizontally, right? So it'll have the labels along the left and for you to add the students to add content across the page to the right. Again, you can change all the labels and customize those. And at this point, people adding content would simply be hitting either the plus here, which will add it directly to the right column, or they can hit the plus here and then they'd need to tell Padlet which section they want to add it to. So they can both be used. The grid format, if we switch to that, allows you to organize things into both columns and rows. So again, you've got to play around with this a little bit and see if it's visually the type of look that you're going for, or if it's going to be more confusing than anything else. Real estate is a real thing in Padlet. And what I mean by that is the amount of space that's being occupied on the screen by one or more posts. If it gets to the point where adding more than 3 or 4 posts starts to compromise the experience, you may need to think about that a little bit when you're choosing your formats. What other formats do we have available to us? We have the table format, which is quite amazing. It's a new format for Padlet, and what it allows you to do is organize the posts down the page in a table, but it separates each of the elements of the post into these columns, right? So I can see the author, I can see the subject of the posts, any attachments, so multimedia elements have their own column, the body text that's there, then you have the reactions and the comments of the students in this space. So it really does create a segment for each of the different content pieces of a post in a new format. I really would encourage that you play around with the table format. It's new, and from what I've seen it used in a number of teaching subjects, it has limitless potential really for people to engage with. It really does spread out all of the different elements of the post for people to engage with. Freeform basically will give us just an empty board where we then have to decide where things are going to go. Whoops, let me go back. Left click and drag, and I can have that over there and that over here and that over here. So you're really getting into that empty canvas type of use of the board. Then we have rows, the timeline tool that we talked about before, where you get to specify your continuum and have your posts left to right. You can reorganize the order of those posts if you need to, if you need it before or after other things. Stream is your social media-esque scrolling down the page view, right? One post after the other, a la Facebook, TikTok, and everything else, right? So very easy to engage with on a mobile device. You're just scrolling up and down. If you want to separate the content into sections, you can add them in and organize the posts underneath, but they're always going to be in a single stream. That's the stream format. And then lastly, we have the map format, which was our introductions map that we saw earlier on, where we're asking people to put posts onto the board and then identify where they are, and then they can add their content. But their post will sit somewhere on the map. And if you've chosen the map format, if I hit done, we can customize our map settings. There's a settings cog, and you'll see if you want to change the style of map that you're using, you can switch between different types of maps, black and white, a nighttime view. We can get a satellite-esque view, for example. There's also a Google Maps view. I'm not sure why it's so dark, mind you. This is the one I wanted. Let's choose this satellite view. If I chose Bathurst now to make my post, hit publish. There we go. So you're getting your satellite view of the globe with the pins being added, and it looks, I would say, a little bit more pleasing than some of those horrible ANSI color codes that we saw a minute ago. A few things to keep in mind when you're configuring your Padlet boards. I'm going to go back into the settings area. You get to configure the heading at the top of the page. The description basically is your subheading, and that's where most people will end up putting in something like that instruction that says click the plus sign to add your post to the wall. You can choose an icon to be added to the board. I might change the format, sorry, just to demonstrate some of the settings. So let's change from the map to just a normal wall. Okay. Right, so here's the heading, My Smart Padlet. So I can change that. New heading in here. Description underneath. Click the plus to add your post. You can see that's given the subheading underneath. Then we can have an icon if we want, and that will just stick that to the left of the title. You can go through and find something that's appropriate to your topic. I'll just choose a telephone at this stage. That'll do. I can save that. So there's my icon up there to the left. The background or the wallpaper, there's a large collection of wallpapers for you to choose from. There are some custom ones underneath. You can upload your own images or pictures or drawings, etc., to them if you like. Otherwise, you might want to choose one of the ones that's in place already from Padlet. You can change from one of 4 different font types. There's not a lot to choose from there. I would suggest you change your post sizes to wide. It gives you a better look at the posts on the board without having to zoom the browser in, for example. By default, Padlet will generally organize the most recent posts to the usually in the first position on the board. But you can change that if you want to switch between first and last. Commenting is turned on by default, which means that if one person adds a post to the board, others can click on the add comment bit underneath to add their own comments. So if you don't want students adding comments, you're going to need to turn that off. Otherwise, I could say, this was amazing, Lachlan, etc., etc. And we can add that underneath. So if the purpose of the activity is getting people to comment on other people's posts, you leave the comments on, otherwise turn them off. What else have we got in here? Reactions. Padlet by default will have several reactions that people can put against the posts, either none or liking. There's also a voting option, upvoting and downvoting. There's stars. You can also give scores. It's not connected to any other system, so before anyone says, can we make this accessible? We cannot. It's not connected to Brightspace, for example, and these are public websites, which means you can't really have students posting their formal assessment content onto a public board. That's a problem. So if you're thinking about using Padlet for assessment tasks, I've seen it used very effectively for let's say scaffolding elements of the assessment, maybe pre and post activities leading up to it, maybe they're formative type activities that lead up towards that final artifact that gets submitted in an assessment portal, but it cannot be used to house the actual assessment content itself. That has to go within a secure environment like Brightspace. Normally I leave liking on and that's it, which basically comes back to if you can't say anything nice, you're not saying anything at all at that point. All right. The only authors that are going to be shown in this are the people with Padlet accounts like myself. For students, they come up as anonymous, but it does have a timestamp that's turned on, so we can see when those posts have been added. By default, posts added to Padlet boards don't require moderation. So you can decide to either have none, which will be on by default. That just means anyone can add things to the board. If you want it to you to have to moderate every post before it appears visibly to the students, you would choose this last option, manual for all posts. Don't pay any attention to this mention of Padlets to students. We don't set up student accounts versus staff accounts. We just have accounts. So if it's mentioning student here, that's not going to help us. And you also have the ability to determine a custom URL for the page. But again, we the type of account we have set up, you don't need to use that. All right, so those are the main settings that you need to worry about. The other area that we have in here is the share settings. And I'm going to finish with Padlet in just a moment and move on to a brief look at Zoom Whiteboards. Clicking on the share button, you'll see that the default setup for Padlet allows students to write to the boards, which means add their own posts, but they can't change anyone else's. They can't change the format of the board. So that's what a writer is. If you just want students to actually be reading what's on the board but not be able to contribute to the board, you would need to change that to reader, or again, maybe potentially as commenter if you just want them commenting on the posts that you've made or that another editor has made. But by default, students are able to engage with the Padlet board as a writer, which means they can add posts. When it talks about the link privacy being secret, it means it's unlisted. You can't go and do a Google search for Lachlan's new heading Padlet board and find it. It is unlisted, like a YouTube video. If you want to turn that into a password protected Padlet site, you could do that, but then of course the students will all need the password. Ignore this org only thing. We don't have it set up effectively, so it doesn't actually work. So really your two options are unlisted or secret with a password. Once you're finished with your board, you have the option to get things like QR codes for people to be able to be directed to it. You can embed the Padlet board if you're familiar with using the embed code. You can copy the embed code from here, embed it into your content. If you wanted to get the link, you could either copy it from in the URL bar at the top, or you could copy the link from here. There's also an option for you to export the Padlet board as a PDF that you can then share. And what it will do is then almost create slides of your posts within the PDF that you could then give to people. So it isn't just a live website. You can get it in multiple formats to provide to people as well. And you can print it. So really it's an environment that encourages you to play around and experiment with the different board formats and the different content types to think about what you might want to achieve in terms of activity. Maybe it's connected to assessment. Maybe it's just engagement that you're building into your topics, for example. But if you're curious about using the tool more, I would encourage that you get in touch with some educational designers to have a chat about the possibilities of using Padlet within your subjects as well. But certainly this is a supported tool, which means there are people around for you to talk to about using it more if that's what you're after. So that is our lightning tour of using Padlet. I now want to spend 10 minutes doing an even faster tour looking at the Zoom whiteboard tool itself. So I'm going to minimize this and go to my desktop and direct you towards the Zoom desktop application. If you're on a CSU computer, you'll find it on your desktop here. Otherwise, you can do a quick search for Zoom and you'll find the Zoom Workplace app. When you launch that, it's going to open the Zoom desktop application, which looks like this. Hopefully this looks familiar. And make sure that you've updated it. If you haven't recently, make sure you do that by left clicking on your profile image and check for updates. You'll then be able to update if you're not already up to date. All right, now the whiteboard. We find by going into the More section at the top, and you'll notice that there is a whiteboards option here. The reason that I'm showing you this now rather than in a Zoom meeting itself is that the whiteboard tool does not require you to be in a live Zoom meeting to use it. It can operate asynchronously, independently, without an actual Zoom meeting itself, which makes it an excellent option for interaction and engagement without needing to be in a live environment. So I've gone into the Whiteboards tab. You'll see it at the top now. And I can create my new whiteboard. Let's make this a bit bigger. And this is the whiteboard environment. I could start doodling on here if I wanted to. But along the left-hand side, we have a number of different tools that we can use to engage with. Text, shapes, lines, etc. Nothing amazing right there, pretty standard, but it also has things like a sticky note feature, which allows the participants to choose different colors to add their sticky notes. Sticky note in here. And you'll notice that we can then customize that sticky note with what we're doing within it. But all of your participants will be able to participate in this environment once we start giving them access. The way we do that is by clicking on Share, top right-hand corner, and now we get to decide who gets access. So what I can do is say anyone with the link can edit on this whiteboard, copy that link, and then I can give it to you. And now you'll find that we have a public whiteboard that doesn't necessarily require that we're in a Zoom meeting to use it. right? So I've now created that board. I might have a look briefly at the share settings just to make sure. Who can use it? Anyone with access, which is the people that I've given the link to, and I can see someone over here, both of you already clicking over there and adding to the board. And so we have a live collaboration space. That's the first part. The consideration that we have at that point is, do we need some structure in our whiteboard? Do we need some instructions? Do I want to be giving you a little bit of some parameters in this place? So maybe if I started by putting in some lines or some sections into here to start organizing where people are putting things, maybe we need some text in here. Maybe I could say, oh, breakfast. And I might be saying at that point, okay, lunch, dinner. So we're already starting to give people an idea about what's expected in this space. I can increase the size if I need to. It's as versatile as you want it to be, but if you want people to achieve a particular output or outcome in using the board, you're going to need to give them instruction and potentially set up the environment in a way that is organized enough for them to participate the way you need them to. But I can see that you've gotten straight in here and you're able to engage with the board and have a play with the different types of tools available in this space. What else can we do in here? Well, if I wanted, for example, to grab images from somewhere, let's just go to Google Images, for example, and say, give me an image of donkey with bananas. Got a real donkey with bananas theme today, that'll do. And say, give me that picture. I can now go back to my Zoom whiteboard and paste the image. So it will literally allow you to do copying and pasting of other types of content and drop them directly onto the board. It'll allow you to drop URLs onto here. It will allow you to share files onto here. So you're getting a collaborative workspace that has real potential for you to set up a live working environment as such. So again, have a play around with the tool set in here. It is very, very simple to use as long as you have a Zoom account. That's all you need to create the boards. The students don't even need that. They just need the link. So there's a start. We've got our collaborative whiteboards. What else can we do with it? Right now we're on one whiteboard. What if we want this to be part of an activity with multiple whiteboards? Up the top here, you'll see page 1 of 1. I can click on that and I now have the ability to add additional whiteboards. So I can add as many of those as I like for our participants to then work between. So if the activity intends for them to move between one whiteboard to another, you can layer those in here and then the participants will be able to jump between them. Okay, so I've done that. I can close this and we're now going to find that you will be able to jump between the first and the second boards. I want to show you one more thing in this space first before I go any further, and that is that we've been sharing this with a hyperlink. What if we could also make it a part of our content in Brightspace? So I'm going to click back up on the share button. And what I'm looking for here underneath this tab is get the embed code. So at that point, I've got a code that I can take. I can jump in and Sue knows exactly where I'm going with this. Find a content page. I'll just put it in a sandbox. Go content. I'm a student. Get out of being a student, Lachlan. Okay, content. I'm going to make a new page. Switch to my code view. Paste the code. Save. And now I'll make the board visible and save. And we now have an embedded whiteboard built into our subject site for people to participate with, which is pretty neat, I think. I'll just refresh this. Yep, there's the board. Okay, so I would suggest you probably want some text and other things there for people to see. It might also be considered a little bit squashed in the real estate, so you might be telling people to open it up in full screen, etc., which they can then do and add to the whiteboard. But we've embedded another type of collaborative workspace into our subject sites as well. So there's some potential there, I think you'll agree, with how to use the whiteboard tool. Now, we talked about this being a part of the Zoom tool set. What I haven't talked about is how we use it in Zoom meetings. So I'll show you that quickly and then we'll wrap up. If I go back to my Zoom desktop application and launch a new meeting, let me drag this across. So here's Lachlan in his Zoom meeting. I hope you can see that okay. You will find the whiteboards option down the bottom in your taskbar. And if I select whiteboards, I can either create a blank one on the spot, which might be a bit chaotic, but if I've prepared one in advance in that desktop application, I can go existing whiteboards. It'll give me the list. And then I can say, yep, that's the one I want to use in this meeting. How do we want everyone to engage with this? Well, I want them to collaborate with it. You can choose present, but I'm going to collaborate with it, open the board, and it now shares the whiteboard inside the Zoom meeting for the participants to engage with. So I don't need to give them a hyperlink necessarily. So it just like using the chat or watching a shared screen, for example, this will allow everyone in the live Zoom meeting to start posting, copying and engaging with the whiteboard itself. So the reason that we talk about this is that there are a lot of whiteboard tools around. Very few of them allow you to give single click link open access to collaborate in a way that is as powerful as what this is. One or more multiple whiteboards that we can then embed in content that we can give hyperlinks to for people to engage with on the spot, or we can use in our live Zoom meeting. It's quite powerful. I think you'll probably agree, but it needs structure. Any of these type of tools need instructions, scaffolding, context potentially to make sure that students use it in the way that we're hoping that they're going to use it. All right, look, I'm going to wrap things up. Thank you for the cows on skis, whoever did that. I love it. I will stop sharing.
It's actually my name, Slow Cows on Skis.
Slow Cows on Skis. I had not thought about that, but now I see it. I do see it. I will stop this Zoom meeting. Let's get out of that. Bring up my, let's see, Padlet board. 1 second. There it is. Okay, so I will give you a copy of the PDF of today's deck, the board that I've been presenting from. I'll drop the link into the chat again. But we've had a lightning tour through two really, really powerful engagement tools. Both of them have really distinct, different use cases, but there's also some commonalities. The fact that you can add both to your subject sites if you want to for asynchronous use makes them really powerful. But also Padlet, lots of different tools for content creation, multimodality, all sorts of potential uses that you might be able to think about for your subjects. Zoom whiteboards, again, different use cases, but equally it allows you to potentially approach some of your peer-to-peer type learning activities in a different way. So I hope you've enjoyed that. I'll stop the recording in just a moment. I'll turn my camera on again for a second, but just say thank you again for turning up for another Teaching Academy PD session. We hope to see you again. Thank you both. I'll stop the recording.
Thanks, Lachlan. That was awesome.
Thanks, Lachlan. Thank you so much. Really useful.